Good day and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. So the war continues. And before we have a look at what is happening near Avdiivka on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, I want to talk about the long-term outcome of this conflict. Now, you have wars of maneuver, you have wars of attrition. World War I, most people would say that was a war of attrition. At the end of the day, the German army during World War I was well aware that it was not going to win a war of attrition. The German army was not defeated in the field. It was defeated through the economics of war. World War II, the dawn of lightning war, the dawn of high-tempo maneuver operations. Most would say that was a war of maneuver. Large mechanized formations, tank divisions, in the traditional sense. The war between Russia and Ukraine has become a hybrid war, both a war of maneuver and, as we watch what is happening now, a war of attrition. So the Ukrainian counteroffensive that occurred in Zaporizhia failed. That was designed to kickstart the Ukrainian campaign from being one of attrition to a war of maneuver. That was designed, that Ukrainian offensive was designed to break the land corridor between Russia proper and Russian Crimea. The ultimate goal of Ukrainian forces, the Ukrainian hope, was to essentially pocket, through maneuver action, Russian forces operating on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, cutting off Russian forces from the east to the west in Crimea. Didn't happen. Did not occur. The Ukrainian military was defeated in that operation. Yes, it was defeated. No one in the mainstream media wants to come out and say that, because it would be politically incorrect. It would be going against the narratives and false narratives that have been created in Western media. Again, going into this June offensive is essentially when it started for the Ukrainians. The mission, the goal, the war aim was a multi-pronged pincer movement designed to split Russian forces and reach the Sea of Azov. That was the goal. And with that goal in mind, it could have, if it was successful, it could have forced the Russians into negotiations, especially if large groups of Russian formations were on the verge of surrender through Ukrainian maneuver. The problem is the Ukrainians did not have air superiority. They don't have an air force in the traditional sense, in terms of one air force has the ability to oppose the Russian air force over the skies of Ukraine and eastern Russia. Furthermore, the Ukrainian population, as in terms of looking at this as a war of attrition, Who will win this war of attrition? The Ukrainian population right now is about 30 million souls. 30 million souls. The GDP of Ukraine right now is about 173 billion USD. 173 billion. The Ukrainian economy is in a state of collapse. It is being propped up by Western powers. Without Western infusion of monetary assistance, the Ukrainian economy would collapse. And some say it is on the verge of collapsing. That is not happening in Russia. The Russian Federation is withstanding Western sanctions. If you go to a Russian grocery store, there's food on the shelves. The Russian military-industrial complex is still very much active. $100 billion defense budget, possibly much more. The Russian economy is well over a 1 trillion USD economy. And again, comparing and contrasting the size of economies, and then more importantly, population. Russia has a population of essentially 147 million souls. The Ukrainian army, as we speak, has an average age right now of over 40 years old. The army is getting older, and that is a sign that the Ukrainian military has taken a great deal of casualties. The reason the Ukrainians have decided to not announce casualty figures and make that a state secret is because the casualty figures are very high. If the casualty figures were not very high, it would not be a state secret. It would not be an issue. They would be reported. But unfortunately for the Ukrainians, those casualty figures are horrendous. And more importantly, the age is very important. When you see 60 and 70-year-old men reporting for duty in Western Europe to undergo training, that is not a good sign at all. And in a war of attrition, the likes which we are seeing right now, you can see a rapid collapse of the smaller opposing nation state, which is Ukraine. It could happen very quickly. Remember Afghanistan? I sure do. It fell apart very quickly. The Ukrainian military, again, as we speak, is under immense pressure. The morale of the Ukrainian military has fallen to an all-time low, especially those forces that are now trapped in Avdiivka. And yes, those forces, those Ukrainian forces, are trapped in Avdiivka. Furthermore, in Avdiivka, we are now starting to see Ukrainian forces turn on each other. The brigade that is assigned to what they call the Citadel, the areas near downtown Avdiivka, are now essentially bad-mouthing the brigade to the south that is designed to defend the right flank of this unit that is designated for the center defense of Avdiivka. They're turning on each other. They're saying that one party is not doing its job. And we also are hearing now that the Ukrainian military is unable to supply those forces in Avdiivka. They have stockpiled supplies, food, but the ability now to get new forces and new supplies into Avdiivka from this area here is being prevented by the close proximity of Russian forces, both on the southern and northern flank. We've also heard that there are current negotiations underway with local battlefield commanders in Avdiivka to surrender Avdiivka. Now, this is the first time we've heard of this, but apparently it is actively underway, against the wishes of the Ukrainian government in Kiev. Again, localized commanders understanding the situation, understanding what is happening in Avdiivka, are now having conversations with the Russians about the surrender of Avdiivka. It's happening. Now, the Ukrainians are continuing to say, hey, we're inflicting horrendous casualties on the Russians. We will continue to defend Avdiivka, much like we saw in Bakhmut, until Bakhmut finally became completely under the control of Russian forces. But that's where we kind of set to today in terms of what is happening with the conflict. Again, we see this narrative by the Ukrainians trying to create this narrative on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, but again, a marginalized operation that really leads to no outcome other than the expense of very valuable, very highly trained Marine infantry that were used in this operation. And my understanding is the Ukrainian military is in opposition to this operation, which was ordered by Zelensky in the political apparatus in Kiev. But again, as we look at traditional wars of attrition, World War I, other conflicts, the Ukrainians are in a very poor situation. The war may look stagnant, and right now I would say it is stagnant in terms of a war of attrition. But the Ukrainians cannot keep this conflict up the way it's going. Eventually, we will see the general political collapse within Ukraine and a military collapse as well. It is not sustainable. The simple fact is the Russian army is getting stronger every day, every week, every month. The Russian military is getting bigger. It has a very robust military industrial complex. The Ukrainian military, on the other hand, is degrading. There may be individual battles that take place on the tactical aspect of the battlefield that gives one the perception that the Russians are taking significant casualties. And they may be. But so are the Ukrainians. And it's not being reported by Western media. Again, state secret in Ukraine. So that's where we sit today. I wanted to provide some analysis on where this is heading and ultimately where this, unfortunately for the Ukrainians, is going to end. And again, Western support, a lot of what's happening on the ground is contingent upon Western support. And the political situation in the United States is going to change. The United States does not want to supply the Ukrainians with an unlimited budget. We have serious issues here in the United States. So that's where we sit. We will continue to provide analysis of the ongoing war. Please support the channel. It was great being with you today. More to come very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.